Hello and welcome to another podcast going into some of the background of some of the characters within the Aisha books, the Chronicles of Dragondom and beyond. I'm calling this They Live Amongst Us. It's an introduction to the Avebury family. Aisha, at the beginning of book 1, meets the Avebury sisters when she leases the little cottage in Avebury, the village. And so, let us dive behind the scenes. Let us journey to the West Country of England, a very ancient part of the island, steeped in mystery and mysticism. On the edge of the Forest of Dean, not a long raven's flight northwest of the village of Avebury and the ancient stone circle, stands a very, very, very old house, the seat of the Avebury family for generations. Well, those last words are unique in this family, as they are not normal humans, as you will see. And the coincidence with the name and the name of the village in the stone circle are also not to be lost. Before the late summer sun goes down completely, let us look in, as they should all be there now. It will give us a chance to meet them and leave before nightfall, unless you wish to stay. But if you do, you will never be the same again. So, a word of caution. But let me not get ahead of myself and introduce them properly. Travelling around towns and through tiny villages of white houses with thatched roofs, the scenery is rural. Rolling green hills with sheep, cattle and horses visible on them, and occasional clumps of woodlands, copses, which seem to be getting thicker. The narrow lane on which we are driving dives into a tunnel, a living tunnel of trees, which seem to come right down to the side of the road, leaving the light behind, save for the dappled light that peeks through the canopy every so often. Overgrown and almost unseen stand the pillars either side of the track, as the land becomes nearly flat again, the ivy tangled around the dragons on the top of each pillar. But these are not concrete and modern, but look as if each pillar and dragon has been carved out of a single large stone. Now, set back in a clearing, is the outline of a house. Lights show in several rooms, both downstairs, and a central light on the first floor. Yet, above this is also another small set of 2 windows in the eaves, tucked under the black slate tiled roof. These are dark, but look like eyes. We have arrived at the house of Gwen and Mabel, and it looks really creepy in the early evening light, like something from another time. Going into the kitchen is like stepping back in time. The light is dim, but warm. The large wooden beams in the yellow cream white ceiling are the first thing you can't help but notice. Some of these have large black hooks coming out from the underneath, the type of hooks that you might think are pirate hooks. Some are festooned with different types of herbs, and others in bundles of something I could not tell. There are also onions and other things that many today would not recognise. Then there are those that are muslin cloths, hanging, gently dripping liquid from them into old-fashioned bowls on the large, heavy wood sideboard. The smell of fresh cake and bread fills the room. And now let us look at the occupants. There was something about the Avebury sisters that is, shall we say, strange. They look about the same age, and while not identical, they are very similar. Gwen Avery being a little more rounded than Mabel, but quite tall, both of them, their ginger red hair flowing down to their shoulders, wild and loose, but not a hint of grey. Their soft brown eyes sparkle, and there are more than a few hints of laughter lines. Both ladies are brown as berries from the sun, and their beautiful West Country dialect flows like music as they chatter. Gwen is standing the other side of a large table that is the centre of the room. Behind her, a large wood-burning hob and stove, radiating warmth throughout all. On the table in front of her is enough food to feed the 5,000. Mabel is sat talking to a man who is in a chair, drinking from a mug to the side. He looks as though he's about the same age as the sisters. His shirt sleeves are rolled up, and his jeans look as though he has been working outside all day, possibly in the garden or something. But it is his face and his eyes that are stunning. They are almost feline. Yes, more feline than human. In fact, more like a lion. Even his eyes seem to have that yellow colour of a cat. If you know your galactics, then yes, you would be right to surmise he is a Lyrian. Actually, he is a hybrid named Marcus. At well over 6 feet, maybe nearer to 7, this gentle giant with the face and eyes of a cat and the mane of long, flowing hair is quite unique, or maybe not. Marcus is, one could say, family as well as friend. Tobias had adopted him a very long time ago when on one of his Watcher missions, and he had found him as an orphan during the wars. They are all busy talking at the moment about the young woman who they have just leased the cottage in Avebury to, Aisha Hughes. They all know is special, and that she is here for a reason. Now they wait for their father's arrival to find out more. Conversation is interrupted by a tapping on the window. Mabel opens it with a quiet musical laugh. "Hello, Merlin. How are Samantha and the young ones? Tabelin, Morgan, Juju and Sprite? I hope they are behaving themselves." Now another figure enters as the raven hops inside the open window. This is a tall and slim man with a short, well-trimmed beard. His hands are large and slim, with very long fingers, pianist fingers many would say. At first glance you would not be wrong in thinking of Dracula from one of the old movies. Cadaverish, yet handsome, with steel grey eyes, and his voice, now as he greets all in the room, is hypnotic. Funny thing is, none of them, none of them, look a day over 50, if that. "She has arrived, then?" His daughters nod in unison. Then he turns to Marcus. "What do your instincts tell you, me old friend? Is she ready?" "Hello, Tobias. No, not quite. But I am sure that within a few weeks in the village, that will change. She may not be the same as us, but she is definitely a lot more than any of us expected. She has very strong gifts and connections already. And if she only knew it, or maybe she does, she is already connected to a dragon. I picked him up when I looked in last night. He told me she is spending a lot of time sitting quietly in the stones, and that the vibrations are moving very fast. Oh, by the way, he said to tell you to contact Dragondom and fill him in as soon as possible." Tobias nodded and looked at the table. "What's all this? Are we expecting guests that I didn't know about?" Mabel laughed. "No, father. This is for tomorrow's run into Gemma's and the others we supply with fresh food and vegetables weekly. But don't stand on ceremony. There is plenty for you to eat as well." The mention of the name Gemma made Tobias look up. This was another of the charges they collectively watched, and all knew that at some point very soon she too would find out she was not just a human, and her training would also have to begin. But unlike the young woman Aisha, who was now accommodated in his cottage at Avebury, Gemma was like them. She was the daughter of Time Lords, who had been at birth adopted out to a human family to hide her from those who would wish to chain her or worse. Before he voiced his question, Gwen answered, "We are still waiting, but all three of us feel the box will arrive soon." He nodded and took the steaming mug of ginseng tea his daughter handed him. First the tea. Then, while Marcus would go his way, back to watch the cottage and Aisha, his daughters would pack everything up for tomorrow's delivery, and he would go to his machine and catch up with his old friend Dragondom, High Wizard of Dragondom, and find out more about this ongoing mission with Aisha Hughes. On second thoughts, he might use their ancient stone circle and drop in unexpectedly, if ever that was possible, on someone like Dragondom. He smiled mischievously. Part 1. Introduction to the Time Lords. The rain had been pouring down all day, and right now there were only a few people sat in the village caf-cum-restaurant, known as Gemma's Nest. There was a table with 3 strangers. A further, sodden young man had arrived and now sat by the fire at a table close to the sisters, Gwen and Mabel Avery, who, once a week, delivered fresh produce and preserves, which they grew themselves in a walled garden of their old house on the edge of the Forest of Dean, a few miles from the village. They always stayed and had something to eat, and in their way kept an watchful eye on young Gemma. Gemma cleared the table where her other guests had been sat. Strangely, she had not noticed them when they left. She picked up the bill and the correct amount of cash that had been left on the tiny silver tray she used for that purpose, then walked back to her desk over by the window. Today she felt happy, despite the weather. "Gemma, why don't you come and sit with us? There is no one else around. Come on, dear. No need to sit on ceremony with us, and I'm sure Yanni won't mind." Gemma looked up. Gwen's voice had broken into her mind as she put the cash into the box from the table, who had left, then put the bill onto the clipboard that she used to keep her papers safe and in order. When she'd actually moved them from the silver tray, she found something else below. Now she was still staring at it. She was confused, and to be honest, couldn't believe her own eyes. There had been an envelope with a note in it. It was addressed to her. When she opened it and read the message, she was puzzled. "Check the mail in your box next door. There is a parcel for you. Use it. It will change your life. You are truly very special." There was no name. She came back to the present when someone touched her shoulder. "Are you all right, Gemma?" It was Mabel. She hadn't seen her leave the table by the fire and walk across the room, yet she had been facing that way. Now Mabel read the words on the note out loud for everybody to hear. "Well, don't just sit there. Go and see what it is. Oh, how exciting! A real mystery to finish the meal. Come on, Gemma, you can't keep us all in suspense." Gemma's heart was pounding in her chest as she placed the box, wrapped in plain brown paper, on the table. She had found it exactly where the note said. It wasn't a big box, but definitely a box. The brown paper wasn't taped, but instead a very strong twine was secured around it, taking in all four sides and thus securing it fully. It was about the size of a child's shoebox. It was light as a feather. Everyone was watching in silence while she unwrapped the package. Inside was a silver-coloured metal box with a hinged lid and a tiny key. Taking the key, she unlocked the box and lifted the lid. She removed the strange envelope. That was the first thing that she came to. The paper felt like parchment, which was unusual, but then everything about this was strange. Below, there were 3 items, each in their own small compartment, separated by slim wooden walls and a clear perspex-type lid on each, with a tiny handle and a gold-coloured hook and eye clasp. The material, or canvas hinges, were there also, so that each box was totally safe and secure. It reminded her of an old-fashioned tea caddy. You could have heard a pin drop. So quiet was everyone. She sat down on the empty chair at the young man's table, which she pulled to the side so as not to have her back to the sisters. Then she opened the envelope, pulled out the several folded pages, and started to read. Gemma, you do not know us, not yet, but it is important that we deliver this gift to you. What I am about to tell you is the truth, although you may think it is only a crazy story. The 2 ladies and the young man, if they are still there, which we expect they will be, can vouch for what I write. Although they do not recognize us, they do recognize the box. Gemma looked up. It was true. They were all staring at the box. The message says that you will, all 3 of you, recognize the box. Do you? Really? The sisters looked at the young man, who they had called Yanni, and then back at the box. It was he who spoke first. Yes, it seems that only a couple of hours ago we were all indeed strangers, yet all of us recognized the box as soon as you opened the package. Before that we had never met, not in this time at least. We knew there was something familiar about the others. He coughed a little nervously, and Gwen took up where he had left off. Gemma, you have known me and Mabel all your life, so you know that people call us the strange things. But you also know we are always honest and we never do anything to hurt anyone. Do you trust us? That might sound a stupid question, but right now it would seem you have a real need to answer it, as we do know the box, and have always known that one day it would turn up. She paused and cocked her head slightly to one side, looking at the young man and then back at Gemma. Her West Country accent was almost soothing in a way. Also, yes, as Yanni says, we did not know him, yet we felt he was familiar. In a way, and in talking, we have managed to solve that mystery. Now it would seem we need to all help you to understand yours. So, do you trust us to tell you what you need? To help you with what you must, it seems, learn? Gemma was quiet for a minute. She looked down at the pages of the letter in her hand, then at the open box that had somehow sent her entire world into chaos, then at the trio of people with her. Part of her just wanted to wake up. It was like a nightmare. It must be. But she knew she was awake. Now the sisters, who she had indeed known all her life, were asking if she trusted them. Of course she did. But what was all this? What was it about? It was crazy. Gemma, it was Mabel. You don't need to answer those questions because we know the answers. So, why don't you read out the rest of the letter and ask us what you need to? Would you like me to pop into the kitchen and get us all a drink while you read? I don't mind, honest, and I think you could possibly do with something sweet to drink as well. She never waited for an answer, simply getting up and resting her hand gently on Gemma's shoulder as she went past and into the kitchen, humming as she went. And so it was that Gemma started to read the letter out loud. Inside the box you will have noticed there are 3 compartments. The items: a gold fob watch, an old-fashioned compass, and a necklace with what is called organite in a medallion. They are very old and, indeed, are unique and priceless. They are yours, from another time and place, and me and my son, who you served earlier, have been charged to bring them to you. It had to be done now, on this exact day, in this exact year. My name is Marcus, and I have come back from the year 2299 to deliver these. It is only part of the reason why we are here in 2021, but it is a very important part of that mission. Before you think that what is written here is a prank, think a minute. Did you hear the little bell ring when we left? No, you didn't, because we did not leave by any door. We teleported out. You see, the fob watch you have in this box is the original, but we have made replicas of it. It is a means of time travel. Gemma stopped reading. This was crazy. She had expected to look up and at Gwen and the others and see them laughing, but they weren't. In fact, they nodded. Now she grabbed for the hot coffee Mabel had put on the table next to the box, then noticed there was a small shot of whiskey sat next to it and grabbed for that instead. This was insane. She was insane. She must be. She had to read on. She needed to understand what it meant. Honestly, needed to see if there was indeed a joke being played on her, yet she had not heard the bell when they left. But time travel, teleportation, Beam Me Up Scotty and Star Trek flooded into her mind. This had to be a joke. Didn't it? Suddenly her mind was clear. She was no longer seeing things as she had been, but everything was crystal clear. The long table behind her was laid, and the food was also there. A couple of bottles of wine opened, and 6 crystal glasses she had never seen before were filled, and, well, everything was normal. 6. Who was that table for? Had she missed something? Out of the kitchen came Mabel with a large gravy bowl, followed by a very striking gentleman, slightly greying hair at the temples, but very slim and extremely striking. Behind him emerged Marcus, no, the forest steward that Mabel had mentioned before. While Mabel finished the table, Gwen rose and introduced the man to both Yanni and Gemma as her brother, Jonathan Tobias Avebury. He stretched out his hand and took Gemma's between his extremely large hands, and she couldn't help notice his hands were icy and the fingers very long as well as extremely strong. Well, young lady, at last we meet. I have waited a long time for this day. Ah, Yanni, I see you were not deterred by our English weather. I honestly thought you may still have your hands full on the other side of the world. Texas, isn't it, that you've been watching? We will swap notes later. For now, let us welcome this beautiful young woman into the family and help her adjust. Gemma was sat next to Jonathan, who automatically took the head of the table, and opposite Yanni. Next to her, on the other side, was Mabel. Gwen sat opposite her brother at the other end of the table, with Marcus next to Yanni. Before they ate, a thanks was given, not only for the food, but for the company. It sounded beautiful, but slightly strange, and it was new to Gemma. Everyone, then, dived in, and there was laughter and certainly a lot of excitement. Even Gemma began to relax a little. By the time she had had a glass of wine, and they had got to the fresh apple crumble and custard, a typical sweet in this area, she was ready to ask a question or two. She took a deep breath, and to no one in particular, she spoke out loud and clear. Could someone tell me, and I know this sounds stupid, but are you all the same as those people who left me the box? There was silence. Everyone stopped talking and looked at her. She felt so embarrassed she could have dived under the table. It wasn't helped when Mabel started to giggle and then laugh. No, we are a little different. They have come from the future, but they will have a limited time to complete what they have to do and then go back. Jonathan looked around the table, then took Gemma's hands and cupped them in his own icy ones. And you are a little different in that, shall we say, we are Time Lords and ladies. You, like a few others on this planet, in this amazingly important time, are what is known as a sleeper. You were born here. In the normal way and at the right time, you have been found. You will now be taught and shown what you are. You were adopted. Did you know that? Yes, of course. My parents told me early on, but this is ridiculous. Okay. Then you are telling me that that box really is mine, and this isn't a crazy dream? She looked at all of them, and each in turn nodded. You have always known this would happen? She looked accusingly at the sisters now. Again they nodded, and suddenly she felt angry. Gemma, my sisters couldn't tell you. All they could do was watch over you and be ready for when they knew the box was coming. They never knew when, except that it would. Now, we are all here to help you, to teach you, and to really make sure you understand the great burden, responsibility this is. You will find it strange to start, but you will get used to it, and then you will be able to help people by using this unique birthright. There was an uneasy silence now. Then it was decided she would return that evening to the sisters' home. In fact, they would all go back there, so they could show rather than tell Gemma, and give her a little practical teaching, and that would go a lot further than theory, and hopefully help her to believe. Gemma watched as Jonathan carefully turned the yellowed pages. However, the words, the writing, was not in English, although occasional words seemed to be. And so, for her, it was impossible to understand, which was maddening. As if hearing her thoughts, Jonathan said, in a very matter-of-fact way, "It's in what is called Middle English. Previously, those who could write did so in either French or Latin. However, if you are interested, then there is a translation of these old books, written in modern English, written by my sisters and myself. So, if you are really interested, ask them, and they will no doubt be more than happy to help you understand and learn a lot more about the last several centuries. As the pages were turned, Gemma soon realised that the beginning of the book was in fact the most recent history. Now each chapter went further back in time. How old was this family? This history was more than you could ever get on the internet, even in the most secure and costly ancestry search. It was fascinating, if not a little eerie. While she was soaking up both the visual and the monologue that spilled into her mind, she was also aware that she was feeling something, almost like a memory trying to come to the front of her brain. Now she gently placed her hand on the book to stop Jonathan from turning the page. The picture, drawing, that had caught her eye was a double stone circle with buildings of some kind inside it. Where is that drawing of? Yanni went to speak, but Jonathan stilled him with a touch of his hand on Yanni's arm. Gemma noticed out of the corner of her eye, but was still gripped by something in that drawing. Do you feel as though you recognise it, Gemma? The question was said quietly by Jonathan. Gemma nodded, but couldn't say anything. Sit down, please. If this drawing has caused you to remember something, then let us use this as a golden opportunity to start your journey. Sit, child, sit. What I am about to tell you may help you to understand, at least in part, a part of your story and our history. It may sound like something out of a science fiction movie, but I can assure you it is all fact, and that before this night is done, you will also have proof of that with your own eyes. Now, he also sat and placed his elbows on the arms of his King-style wooden armchair. He leaned back and started to talk. The drawing is of a time portal. One might say it is the secure method of leaving our ancestral dimension to venture into anywhere, including here to Earth. However, on our home planet, this concept was taken further. Our capital and other metropolis are actually built within these portals and shielded from all. Yes, similar stone circles exist here, especially in the West Country, but they also exist all over the Earth and all over the universe, and through all dimensions of the quantum time continuum, only on a far smaller scale for the most part. For now, please don't worry about not understanding quantum physics and the likes. Humans as a race are only just beginning to unfold the very edges of it. Anyway, I digress. A slight breeze touched the back of Gemma's neck, and she saw Jonathan look up towards the door, which was behind her. Someone must have entered. As I was saying, this particular circle is in the zone which has always been home to the Time Lords. One might say it is our equivalent of Earth. Here we live, have families, and work. Here we have a life which, while very different, is in many ways similar to anything elsewhere in the all that is. Time, however, is very different, and as lords and ladies of time, our job, if you like to call it that, takes us everywhere, to any place in time that we are asked to attend or that we wish to experience or help. However, he paused as if to see if Gemma was still listening, as she was still staring at the book. However, there was a time when there was unrest in the governing family, and indeed there was a great deal of talk of treason and possibly a power grab. Young ones were sent to special areas to be schooled and cared for by special teachers, while their parents and elders continued either their work in other sectors or while they tried to find what had gone wrong by untangling timelines and looking for a missing key. The atmosphere in the room felt suddenly heavy, and Gemma looked up as the conversation had stopped abruptly. Everyone was silent, waiting for Jonathan to continue. We had always been governed by the President and the High Council. However, some eons before this had changed. Then the President was a very empathetic leader, and by majority consent him and his family line were voted in as, one might say, a royal lineage. It was deemed, at the time, a way of ensuring continuity for a special line who indeed at first brought great stability and empathy to our lives. Believe me, Time Lords can be very surgical and cold race at times. It is part of our makeup, caused by the work we undertake for Source, the main source of all. So, to be able to return from long and mostly solo operations, it was gratifying to come home to happy laughter and cherished members of the family. He sighed. Even we make mistakes. Even the most advanced beings are not totally infallible, even though we may hope that we are. Things changed, and while the leader was empathetic, he was not strong enough to stand up against some of the hardliners. One in particular came back from one of his sorties into a particularly dark zone of the quantum dimensions. He had been on the missing list, for he did not return to report as he was due to. When he did, his usual icy self was markedly different, even more caustic. There were murmurs that he may have been infected or turned, one might say, and to cut a long story short, he worked on the brother of the king and before long had enough followers to take control. That was it. Since then, things have got worse and worse. Hence, some families, to save their children from possible execution or worse, have spirited them away, and they have been raised on other planets. Like you, Gemma. Gemma went to talk, but he raised his finger and placed it to his lips, directing her to silence. That is enough background for now. Are you ready to see something? Things which will help you understand that things are not always what they seem. Marcus, while I put things away here and go and see my sisters quickly, why don't you introduce Aisha and Gemma, and then take Yanni and her to Aisha's? I will meet you there, and then we can go to step 2 of this awakening journey. Suddenly, everything around her seemed to shimmer, and then disappear, to be replaced by a totally different space. Now she was in a small room with no windows, and it seemed no door. The space was not very big, but there was a small writing desk with ornate carving and what looked like mother-of-pearl inlay, a single chair, the floor standing lampstand, whose gentle light bathed the space, giving enough light to see clearly, and a large bookcase, were the only other thing visible in the room. Jonathan ushered her over to the bookcase with him. Then he touched the dragon's head carving on the inside of the bookshelf. The third shelf up slid sideways, and behind it was a hidden compartment. Gemma could feel her heart beating. She wasn't afraid, but she was finding everything very strange. Now Jonathan placed her box, with the watch still inside it, onto the bottom shelf of the twin-shelved compartment. It stood next to a similar box, but was distinguished by the fact, for some reason, it seemed to have a glow, a golden glow, coming from it. Each box, she now realised, had a different coloured radiating light, which made each unique. She gasped, unable to cover her surprise and wonder at what she was witnessing. Jonathan removed the tiny key from the lock and checked the lid to make sure the box was locked, and then he closed the compartment again by touching the dragon's head. Once more the books slid into place, and the boxes and hidden compartment now were hidden once more from anyone, as if they never existed. Right, young lady, that is step 1. Now your box is totally secure, not only from thieves, but also from other Time Lords who may, sadly, wish to steal it. We live in dangerous times, and you must also understand that. Right, to the next security measure that we have in place here. He turned to the desk and started to open the front. The sloping front opened and would become the writing surface, and as it reached the point of being half open, suddenly lights started strobing in the room. He held steady until they stopped, then lowered it fully to become the writing surface. The inner compartment was standard for a Victorian writing desk. There were several compartments for paper, envelopes, and also a diary. Along with these she noted some small drawers, a beautiful inkstand, and old-fashioned nibbed pens. Now Jonathan opened the central drawer and actually pulled it right out. Once out, he reached his long fingers into the empty space. There was an audible click, then nothing. They waited. Take out your pendant, Gemma, and place it on the bottom of the drawer, along with the compass. She looked a little confused, but did as she was told. When the pendant's orgonite surface rested fully on the wood that made the bottom of the drawer, she felt a warmth flow through it. The compass. She watched as the dial span fully around once, then froze for a second, before once more indicating north. With another click, a hidden compartment opened. It was actually a false bottom, and below there was space for a key. It was empty at the moment. Jonathan handed her the tiny key and nodded for her to put it in place. He then closed the compartment and advised her to pick up the pendant and compass again. Right, now you will have to learn to use the compass and the pendant. They have registered exact location and codex to allow you, personally, and no one else, to access the key and the box. So, young lady, are you ready to learn? He put his hand out to her again, palm up, and as soon as she touched it, they were shimmering back to the study, and Aisha and the others were still waiting. Marcus and Yanni aimed for the doorway, apparently as soon as she became visible in the room. Jonathan nodded silently, and Aisha beckoned her to join them. Marcus led the way, talking with Yanni about the wildlife of the Himalayas, and the two girls followed. Gemma had expected to head for the front door, but instead watched with a little confusion as they made instead for the stairs and started up them. "We're using the fast route. You have a lot to learn. You might as well start with this. Anyway, when you understand a little more, you will be able to pop over for a drink and a chat at any time without leaving by any front door, back door, or the need to drive." Aisha's voice was almost a whisper. She was smiling, and you could hear laughter. Now they both went up the stairs and caught up with the others as they entered the attic room. Having ducked behind the large wall hanging that covered and hid the small entry door from sight, the attic room looked vast. The stairs had brought them up to the side of an expansive space. Lights, which were placed strategically the full length of the space, were old-fashioned wall lights, almost medieval in design, but each had the glow of electric light rather than oil or candle power. Ancient blackened beams as big as tree trunks, made up the main structure of the ceiling, and while no one had to duck under any, there wasn't a lot of extra headroom for someone as tall as Marcus. Gemma looked around. While everything was orderly, there were very definite zones to the immense space, areas hidden behind ornate Japanese screens, old ship-style trunks with numerous destination labels plastered across their outside. Also a space which looked like a bedroom, with a partially screened doorway beyond. Gemma was so engrossed that she started when Aisha touched her forearm. Jonathan had arrived, and they were all waiting on Gemma. She felt almost embarrassed when she realised that everyone was looking at her. "Is everyone ready now?" Jonathan had his watch in his hand. He was gently rubbing the silver hunter's fob watch with his thumb. He looked around all of them and then turned to face the large painting of a mountain scene which hung on the far wall opposite where they stood. "Good. Okay, boys and girls, follow me." He smiled and simply walked to the painting and disappeared. Then Yanni. Marcus stood to one side and beckoned Aisha and Gemma to follow. Gemma felt as though she was rooted to the spot. Where had they gone? "Come on, Gemma. There really is nothing to fear but fear itself." "Oh, come, simply grab my hand and we will go together. This being your first time, I can understand the nerves." Aisha had disappeared, and now Marcus reached for Gemma's hand, and his massive fingers gripped her small hand, and with a cheeky wink he walked forward. The scenery was identical to the painting. It was the painting. The small group was now standing on a small rise, next to an ancient stone sundial, a small wooden fence making a semicircular enclosure that allowed safe viewing over the sloping landscape, with the high snow-capped peaks forming a 360-degree backdrop. The sound of cowbells, of the mountain horn, and the hum of nearby insects added to the magical feel. "Yanni, will you please show Gemma how we move forward if we are simply using this area as a stopover? I presume you have not forgotten any of the basics?" You could almost hear the laughter underneath Jonathan's voice, and then he winked, and Yanni laughed.